from New York City, investment legend himself. Steven, how are you? Welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Julien. Glad to be here.
This is the third time we're doing this now. We have met a lot of companies. What is your feedback so far? I think we have really found some little gems out there. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think what became very clear as they made their presentation is that it's not one size fits all. Every company's got a different story and they need to tell it differently. You know, they can't say that I need to start this way and end with this because they have different challenges. There's going to be different concerns from investors and customers and other stakeholders. And so you really need to practice this, let people hear what you're saying, and make sure that your pitch is tailored to the story you need to tell.
I completely agree. And I think we have seen the benefit we have done to the companies we have talked to in the past. They're so quick to adopt, and something that takes so little to make the story and the vision just so much easier to understand and so much easier to follow. Tonight, first off, we're joined by Alex Bormann, who's joining us from Germany. Alex, how are you?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm great. It's an honor to pitch today. I'm in the middle of holiday, but that is one of the highlights.
Don't repeat that to your wife. I know she's not listening. You know, your children, your family is the highlight on your vacation. But thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Yeah.
Alex is an old friend of mine. We know each other from a pitch event, I would say 5 years ago or something like that. And I am so happy to see that you're still out there, that you're still fighting your battles, that you get better every single day. But we also know that the technology you're bringing to market needs big capital, right? And this is why I thought it was good to talk to somebody like Steven, who has a history and experience of working with big money. Alex, tell us what you're doing and why you need big money.
Yeah, so I have slides. Is that okay to share them now?
I think it's better if you just talk to us for a little bit and then maybe give us a little of a picture, just one picture of the system you're coming up with. But just give us an introduction so we can see you. Because right now we have to choose.
Yeah, it's just a few slides, and I think it's because it's a complex, I would say, journey we're doing, and I really would like to share it with the words to hear, and that could squeeze in the 3 minutes you gave us. And,
absolutely. Then go ahead.
So then let me share the desktop. Here we go. And I hope you can still sense me personally, such as I'm presenting. So I will start right now. Stephen, great honor to pitch in front of you. Thank you, Julien, for hosting me. My name is Alexander Bormann. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Enerkite, a Berlin-based startup which aims to provide global access to dependable clean energy. And we do this by means of fully autonomous kite systems which fly high above the blade tips of two-day wind turbines, where they meet stronger winds and they can catch twice as much energy at the same power and deliver it for half the cost compared to conventional wind turbines. Well, that works small and is scalable to big, and we recently achieved big breakthroughs. And after a decade of comprehensive development and testing, we present now our leading wind power solution to investors. And the first time to institutional investors. It's a simple and robust and efficient kite, which you can see high up in the air. This is the launching phase, which is launched from a rotational mast system. And this is our unique approach to something which is clean and affordable and dependable. We keep it simple in the air and keep it safe on the ground. 44 patents are granted, and the proprietary software secures that this is a solution not easy to copy. We are addressing for entry markets which match the 100 kilowatt scale, diesel replacement in mining, in islands, for rural electrification, e-mobility. We get calls from the Bahamas, from Haiti, from those islands where energy got lost and they need a replacement soon. And we can scale up into the today's known megawatt scale to be a part of the energy turnaround. It's not just the technology scale, it's our business model focusing on engineering, on the software, and delivering a solution to the customers in our sales channels and marketing. We're not, the production and assembly and the power production is done with industry partners and the customers. We, however, do the maintenance and after sales to secure the know-how goes back into the development. Our go-to-market strategy is clear to partnership with high-impact customers such as Engie. The partnership is lasting for more than 2 years now, and we're preparing pilots in e-mobility and PV hybrid solutions. Storengy is a German partner which uses the energy from kites to have a baseload capable self-supply and potentially power-to-X solutions. We have in dialogues with IX for Kanin Energy in the islands of Middle Asia and local partners. The MVP is to be launched in 2021, and it feeds into a stepwise commercialization. So in phase one, we do preliminary products for pilot customers with a high growth potential, Germany, France, and EU, and then we go abroad. The growth strategy, a little bit looking in the back, for the decade, we have spent 13 million euros raised from private funds and from R&D money. We got prestigious grants from the EU and the German Ministry of Economy. And for the piloting activities, industrialization and growth, we are planning for next and the 2 years. We need another 7 million. And with conservative approach, we are addressing a turnover of 140 million until 2026 and have an exit scenario established therefore. So the invitation is here to you investors to invest in an award-winning team, fly high with Enerkite, and let's do the market entriness and scaling up together. Join us in a sustainable, let's say, way ahead where each euro of your investment can save up to 1 ton of CO2. Thank you.
Excellent, Alex. It has improved so much. I mean, you can see the big difference from when we talked about 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. Obviously, a lot of more experience. Are you out there pitching a lot, or you just feel better while you're on vacation?
I wish I could do more, and as you can see from the color pics, the graphics is not finished yet. So, so yes, but of course, coming from 10 minutes pitches to 5 and 3, it's much more than the focus now, and I'm glad to hear your feedback, Steven.
Excellent.
So that's the first time you hear it, I think, is it?
Yes. Well, I have heard similar stories. You're not the only one who's trying to capture the wins all the way up there. And so I have seen stories in the past. I think, as I started the discussion, each story is different and needs to be tailored. I think with yours, it's something that seems complicated and capital intensive. And I think you need to acknowledge that right up front. I think you need to say, I'm going to put it in my words, and eventually we'll figure out the right words to say it. But to an investor, hey, I know this is scary, but don't be scared. Let me tell you why. Like, I know you're seeing kites flying over and you think there's a big gust of wind or a storm that comes by and there goes my capital expenditure, right? Why is this safe? Why is this economical, right? Another part of it is, why do we need it? Right? I've got all these turbines right there. Why do I need to have this kite flying above it? So I think you have to say, look, this seems something that's futuristic, right? Maybe it seems like it's something that we'll be doing 30 years from now, but it's really not like that. And let me tell you why. Because you gotta, I think, right away allay the fears of your investor, right? Wow, big, high-tech project, a lot of money. This feels like something that I'm taking a lot of risk and I may not see my investment back. You're not going to talk to them about their investment and the return. You're going to talk to them about why this is, don't worry, it's not so scary, right? And so you got to jump on that right away. People see kites flying, and as you know, it's going to take a lot of capital, takes a lot of work, a lot of engineers. It's a big undertaking. So that the second part of that is, with such a big undertaking, right? You're not another software. That's an easy undertaking, but that doesn't move the needle that much. If you're going to make such a big undertaking, you really have to tell people why we need to do this. How it's so much more additive. How if we really want to get to a grid that's 100% renewable, right? We're going to need sources of renewable energy that are there all the time, as opposed to solar or wind, right? Or they're much more consistently. So I think all of that is important to start with. The details of patents granted and all of that can come later. But at first, you've got to say that this is not as hard as it looks. And we're not saying it's easy, but it's also worth the effort. And then I think you need to spend just a little more time, even in your front pitch, of like how this works, because I see the kite tethered there, and my first thought is, okay, how do I get that energy to become electricity, right? So a quick 20 seconds on how the technology functions would be worthwhile, because I'm seeing kites up there that look tethered with something really strong to keep them there, but I don't know if that's a transmission line. I'm not really sure how that works. I know how wind turbines work. I can see how wind turbines work. I know how solar panels work. I don't know how the kite works, right? And so I think early on you have to explain that also.
I totally agree, Steven. I think it's a really good point. Let me chip in there for a second. I think what's missing, and that's a big difference between pitching to Germans and pitching to Americans, right? What I would like to see from you at the very beginning in the pitch, yes, as Steven said, we all know it's a big risk, right? And it's technically complicated. But if you look at the U.S., if you look at the Midwest in the U.S., and you look at these cornfields where not much is happening right now, where they need jobs, I would like to hear from you that this is an investor opportunity. Right? I mean, if they can make this thing fly and this can balance solar grid, then we're pretty much there. We have solar during the day, we got wind during the night. We can use this massive agricultural lands you find in the US, for example, to build $1 billion business. And I think of you always, this could be an amazing IPO story if you can pull this thing off. But I don't get the vision yet when you get started. I don't get the sexiness yet of maybe potentially huge story that's going to revolutionize the market. You're very timid, and I know where it comes from being in Germany. But I think, Steven, I don't know how you feel about this, but you could sell this if you would be American, it would be sexier.
Well, I guess that's why there's Americans out there who say, I'm going to have a private space business, right? It's a big idea. It needs a big delivery, right? It's not just an engineering change. It's not a better engine or something like that. And Germans are such excellent engineers. But this is something that's disruptive. And so it requires a presentation that goes along with the magnitude of the opportunity.
Yeah, the magnitude of the opportunity is hidden in boring market numbers, and the creating potential is listed there about 3 minutes. So
I know, and that's hard, and I know 3 minutes you can't cover everything.
We can't.
And I don't think you need to cover much about the IP, for instance, in the 3 minutes, because I'm going to assume that developing something that's so novel, you've got a lot of IP. Right, that can come later.
That's a good point, and some expressions are vague. So I hear different feedbacks, and some people say, no, doesn't matter the principle. It's just about the market. So it's always a pick in a 3-minute pitch. It's hard to pick the right thing, and I love investors who like to understand what's behind, and so. Maybe it's a way to, if we know that the investor has not had the chance to be informed upfront, I think it's a compliment to the right investors to say, look, this is how we do it, different from those who failed, and that's actually our other complicated story. Makani failed with a much more complicated system in the air, so Shell refused to further finance it, and also the market story is a little bit tricky, because all the focus now, Breakthrough Energy has investigated with Capgemini. They would focus on offshore wind and floating offshore wind. that's nice, but we can deliver half the price and in front of the people's homes. So there's less power transmission and everything. It's a long story with all these advantages, which of course are advantages of our customers. And Engie is really suffering from expensive offshore projects right now, and say we have so much sun in the south and there's no wind turbine economically feasible to balance the renewable load in these areas. Maybe to start with this story as a bigger picture and say we can outperform the current choices for floating offshore wind and can create the double potential for wind in the total market to accelerate the transition into a carbon-free environment. That's what drives us, basically. And maybe that is not...
Well, you said something interesting as I'm listening to this, and I was thinking of it differently. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a wave power company present, and we got to the point where, wouldn't it make sense to put these devices in an offshore turbine field deployed that way so that you could piggyback on the transmission system that's already there, right? Mm-hmm. Here, I was looking at it and say, wow, this could be additive to a big turbine installation that already exists, right? You have the turbines, and if there's good wind, you could put more of these out there and just generate more energy in that area, in those square kilometers. But there's another side to it too, which is you can actually now generate wind and significant amount of wind energy in a place that you couldn't really deploy large turbines.
Exactly.
So to kind of say that it's got, why do we need this? Well, we need more renewable energy. There's limits on what we can do with the current technology. There's also cost considerations. We have a technology that can either be additive to big wind turbines, or it can go into places where wind turbines can exist and can supplement the limitations we have with solar.
Exactly.
Steven, one question.
It's very friendly with solar because it doesn't put tower shades on the panels and can exactly what's our client when I say we have pilots planned in PV hybrid solutions. That it's an ideal hybrid complementation of existing PV plants in areas where the wind is not economically viable, providing economically viable conditions for conventional wind turbines. Exactly. And
Steven, sorry, Alex.
It's difficult to pitch. Well, let me add this one very thing, and it's like an anecdote. We have talked a lot to people which are totally against wind turbines, and they would never allow to have wind turbines put up in Klicksbill in north of Germany, where wind turbines are all around. They say no. And then they see our system and say, wow, and you can land it when there is no need for renewable energy. On Sundays, for example, you can land it. Yes. So, wow, this is a technology we want. So it's just from the simple perspective of acceptance and integration into a future which we like to not only just to have carbon-free, but also nice looking. That's the main reason for offshore, and we have this is vanishing with our flexibility.
One point from my side, and I think it's at the very beginning of the discussion, we were talking about every company has their own story, right? And it needs to be told differently. I think the one point we see also is that every company has a different story, and how you should tell the story depends on the investors you're talking to. And there are huge differences between, American investors, German investors, tech-based investors or exit-based investors. My final question to you, Steven, if you're looking at this from an investor perspective, what would be a suggestion to make this sexier? I mean, I didn't get from the presentation the potential that is there to turn this into maybe even at some point an IPO story. Have 500 of these things on the ground with massive, growth. There's nothing like it out there. It's already flying. These guys have been working on it for 10 years. I'm missing that sexy spice that you go as an investor and say, listen, this could be like a flying Tesla, something really cool I can make money on. What's your take on that?
Well, look, there are people that have invested in flying cars and in space travel and things like that. You need investors who have that kind of imagination and that broad vision, and you're not looking for investors who are looking for that next incremental improvement, right? So yes, this is a way to filter out your investors and who are the ones who are really willing to lean into creating the future. But I think what would really help, because those are the investors that are going to do it no matter what. So go with them, go with the vision and say, look, you actually think that this could be the third large source of renewable energy, wind turbines, solar panels, and your kites and what you're doing. It could be that large. It has that much application, and it has the right kind of return on invested capital. And so to say that you're not here to add a few kites here and there, you're here to create sort of a whole new sector of renewable energy that can supplement, can actually be in many places where we're looking to deploy a much better alternative than our existing technology. And then I say, okay, I look, there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of capital that you need and all that, but the return is worth it.
We'll work on this, Alex.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So what I really take here is for the pitch, and it's a dialogue to the investor. It is much more personal, and it's addressing the fears and the distance, and we can really point on that we have gone more than half the journey. We have a 10 years past where we believe that this will be a successful business, and we were surprised of how much R&D we had to do, but now we are about on the way to commercialization, and that's I think that the sweetest spot to get into that journey.
Yeah, think of this as a storyteller. It's easier to turn fear into excitement than it is to turn boredom into excitement, right? So you've got a channel, everyone's saying, oh, really? You know, kites, what about, and then turn that into that energy, that alertness that they're going to have right off the bat in a first a defensive way, I'm worried, and just channel it into a really positive energy, say, wow, I didn't know that. This is really interesting. You can't do that with, you know, a software story. You know, you can't get people as excited for that as easily.
No.
Exactly. My closing word, and then we have to move on to San Francisco. Oliver, is that correct? Yeah. Very early. Wow. Before we go to organic ranking cycle and waste heat to energy solutions, Alex, to be honest, what I can hear from you, and maybe it's because I know you for a long time, I can hear all the suffering and sacrifices and pain you had to go through for the last 10 years to get to this point. But now we need to see the story going forward. And that kind of needs all that, you know, stored up frustration from the last 10 years. And I can so relate to this, right? You know, I'm in a very similar position myself. Things are difficult to run this kind of technology research for 10 years, not run out of money. It really takes a massive amount of sacrifice. Most people never grasp. But I think with Steven's help, I think we can turn this really into visionary stories and sell it to the right investors. And if we can kind of add part of this story, I mean, like with creating jobs in the Midwest of the US and balance solar storage and wind, I think for US investors, we could have something that could be an amazing story. Let's keep working on it. We're going to get you back on the program in 2 weeks, Alex, with an updated story. And we're waiting for you to inspire us next time. But first, get some vacation.
Great pleasure.
I know you deserve it.
Alex, I do have a couple of investors in mind or platforms in mind that are looking for the big stories, the exciting stories. So we should reconnect and talk about that.
Definitely. I will get back to you, and whatever is needed up front, 1 page, 3 pages, I can hand it over. Maybe let's connect on LinkedIn first, and then from there.
I'll make the introduction, guys. Alex, thank you so much. Say hi to your family. All the best.
Bye-bye.
As we're switching on to one of my favorite subjects and something I worked on for a long, long time because I think it's really, really, really necessary, and that is the totally unsexy but inefficient usage of waste thermal energy. And waste thermal energy means that pretty much every combustion process you have, every industrial process you have, in general produces, you know, whatever they're producing and a lot of heat, whichever way you spin that. And that heat obviously has still a lot of energy stored into it and is one of the most neglected energy resources in the world right now. It's an energy resource that can be tapped pretty much for free because it's already there, but it has been rather difficult to kind of harness that energy out of waste heat, turn that into electricity in a reliable way. and now slowly getting to this point where organic ranking cycles are really coming to the market. And we're welcoming Janice, who maybe has a little bit more light for us. You're a little bit dark there. I know it's early for you. And welcome to the program. How are you?
Hey, good. I don't know what's going on with my computer here. Sorry. Let me,
We can see you, Janice. It's just a little dark. The sun hasn't risen there yet.
It is very dark.
Is it coming from Canada,
yeah.
not from San Francisco? So there we go.
Exactly.
Perfect.
There we go.
Much better. Let me introduce Janice,
right.
Steven, Janice. Thank you for coming on the program.
Yep. Thank you. So I'm. Would I be able to share my screen here?
Janice, can you start with telling us a little something about yourself and your company, so we have a little bit of an idea?
Okay. Yeah. Sure. And yeah. So I've got some slides here, but I don't need them. It looks like the host is disabled the sharing. Yeah. So my name is Janice Tran. I am the CEO and co-founder of Kanin Energy. We work on waste heat to power projects. So what we do is we go to industrial sites and we look for waste heat over and above 150 degrees Celsius or 300 degrees Fahrenheit. You can find this at cement plants, steel mills, natural gas compressor stations, fertilizer, a lot of like heavy industry here across the world, and especially in North America. So what we do is we find this waste heat and then we capture it and run it through an organic Rankine cycle turbine, which is off-the-shelf technology, very kind of old proven technology. And then we create clean electricity from it. This is base load, high capacity factor, emissions-free energy. So yeah, it looks like I'm working now.
And Janice, that electricity that you create is used in the same plant, or is it used for the grid? What's the where's the output go?
Yeah, so the electricity can be sold preferably behind the meter back to that host. So for example, if a cement plant is producing that electricity, then we would sell it back. Usually these heavy industrial plants have a lot of electrical load. And if it's not sold behind the meter because they don't have the load, then we can sell to the grid. Yep, so we can do both. It's really on a case-by-case basis. Here's the diagram here about on our business model. So industrial facility creates waste heat. In the status quo example, it just goes to the atmosphere. So what we do again is we take that waste heat, we run it through an organic Rankine cycle turbine called an ORC. And then the Kanin Energy's business model innovation is that we do end-to-end development. So we do engineering, design, construction, we follow the permittings, we find the opportunity, and then we find the capital as well. So we have a network of capital providers that will actually pay for the project and own the project. So that ORC project will create energy and carbon offsets revenue, and then we share a portion of that back to the industrial facility. So from the industrial facilities perspective, they get a free kind of ESG story on their property, and they also get paid for their energy and offset carbon revenue. As well, they also get reduced electricity prices if they choose to buy it from the And yeah, so this is great because it allows the grid to have more clean baseload power. There's also an energy reliability component to this model as well. And yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. In fact, we skip this slide here. So 42% of energy we actually see ends up as work, but 58% of that is actually rejected as energy, as heat energy, meaning there's about a 9.6 gigawatt potential of waste heat to power. Just in North America alone, there's a lot more potential, obviously globally, but it's about a $24 billion opportunity that we've scoped out. These are the different sectors that we're focusing on. So natural gas, cement, iron and steel, and glass. And this is our pipeline. So we currently have about $875 million worth of projects in our pipeline. That's about 291 megawatts of high capacity factor projects across 25 projects. We've been in play for about 6 months here, and basically, we don't get a lot of no's. So I think we've hit what in a lot of startups called product market fit. We're getting a lot of yeses. A lot of companies are really interested in what we're doing because it's kind of a no-brainer for them. And yeah, so we're just going through our pipeline. We've got 3 projects that are in final stages, term sheet stage, and we're hoping to close at least one of them by the end of the year. So I'm just gonna roll through here. So we're seeking a $500,000 seed investment from investors at this point. And yeah, so I can go more from there, but maybe I'll just pause there. And this is just a picture of our team.
Very cool.
So, Julien, you want me to start off?
Steven, you probably know what an organic Rankine cycle is and everything else, right?
Excuse me?
You probably know what an organic Rankine cycle is and everything else? Otherwise, let me take it here from 1 second, because you said one thing that makes me feel a little bit old. You say ORC systems are a proven technology. Like when I started in this industry, this was like one of those holy grail technologies that never really seemed to work. Low temperature steam turbines converting low temperature steam, using kind of, oil fluids, which are condensing at a lower temperature, condensing them back, and therefore, using low temperature heat for electricity generation. And I was actually there in the first, you might remember a company called Calnetics that later sold to GE. And I worked with Fraunhofer that later sold to Dürr. So I think 3 of the ORC systems that are in the market right now, we're actively involved in. Generally, I think this is a great market opportunity, but it needs a little bit of explanation. How do you see that, Steven? Your feedback?
Yeah, my feedback is, on the surface of it, it all makes a lot of sense. It's very easy to say, yeah, there's waste heat and we should be recapturing it and reusing it for something. I can get through your kind of first business proposition very quickly. I think in your case, and we always say every story is different, you're dealing with really large companies with big facilities, right? And you're asking for a 500,000 seed investment. So that's a disconnect, right? And so what I would start with in yours, once you say what you're doing, is a little bit of an explanation of what your company is, who you are, what your team is, where you've gotten so far, and what makes you think that a relatively small company, I'm assuming small, again, because of the size of the seed investment, can really create and execute on that pipeline, right? And what that pipeline means. So you had very large utilities and steel manufacturers, cement manufacturers. I know how carbon intensive those industries are, right? That right there in those 4 sectors, yeah, you probably have close to 15 or 20% of the carbon emissions on the planet. So the opportunity's there, the market's there, but why are you the company to capture this? Why are you the ones to provide the solution to these very large counterparties, very large customers? And so I think in my case, for me to say, let me dig in, this is interesting, because I know there's a problem to be solved. I then need to be convinced pretty quickly that you're the right ones to solve this. And so I think I need more in the presentation to say, let me tell you a little bit about us, our background, our connection, our backers, our advisors, and why we think in our target market, with all of the sales wins, including being a small entity, we can make this work. Because if I'm running a steel plant and I'm the director of manufacturer, director of operations, yeah, I understand there's value to be achieved there, but I don't want to mess around with my process, right? And I certainly don't want to mess around with my process with somebody that on the other side of it who I don't have full confidence in. Right? So if a brand name company came along, if Honeywell came along and said, we can do this for you, I'd say, okay, it's Honeywell. And if they mess it up, I have recourse. But when Kanin Energy comes along and says I can do it for you, you've got to convince me that this is not a bad career move on my part. Now, this is not all for your 3 minutes, but I need enough in the early part to say that you guys have capital providers, technology, advisors, credibility, relationships that you'll be able to execute on this opportunity.
Yeah, I didn't go through it. Sorry, I realized I was running up on my 3 minutes. I can go through that. I can go through that now if you'd like.
Yeah, it's up to Julian. I mean, we're actually, you're not pitching right now to an investor. We're just working on making the pitch better. But when you get that opportunity, I think a lot more about you and your team and your platform would be very valuable. Julian?
And then I think also, Janice, a quick introduction. I mean, as you say, I mean, the business model you have, you provide energy as a service, right? You're a business developer. You own the system that you are installing. And there's definitely good reasons for that because, a lot of these big companies are very, very slow in their investment decisions and their capital decisions. So there is definitely a market for it. But I would make that very, very clear from the beginning that you offer waste heat to energy as a service as an EPC partner to large industrials. I think then it's easier for us to grasp in the first, few seconds of what you do. And I would, what technology are you using? I mean, there are not that many out there.
Yeah, so we're technology agnostic. The two front runners for our technology are Exergy and Turboden. Turboden mostly because there's a lot of deployments in North America, so we don't have to be the first. But Exergy is actually the ideal technology. So our team actually went through all of the patent filings and also a lot of conversations with these companies. And Exergy was the best technology because it's radial outflow tech. It's more efficient. It takes up smaller space. But the problem is that it's the smallest of the three kind of major front runners, Ormat, Turboden, and Exergy are the top three. It just doesn't have any like North American installations yet. So yeah, again, we don't know if we want to be the first one on our first project, but at some point we will be.
But again, always, I mean, there are pretty much only three players in the market: is GE, Turboden, and Dürr at this point. So. I know that Turboden has been a little bit weak in the U.S. in the past because they have been sold. I don't even know who owns it now, Mitsubishi or Hitachi or one of these companies.
Mitsubishi, yeah.
But I would mention that at the very beginning because if you're talking to people that have dealt with waste heat to power operations in the past, if you say, we are here, we are a service provider using Turboden or GE technology, and you could maybe even do a partnership with them, maybe a little bit of co-branding for the United States, I would put that on the front slide because now you saying Turboden, if you execute on the project, I have, from a technology perspective, no more issue. Right? If you're the guys that are financing a Turboden system, you got a business case. It's as simple as that. But I would use that and the owners, you said it's Hitachi at this point, right?
Sorry, so the last part there?
Who's owning Turboden right now?
Mitsubishi,
okay, sorry. But saying, we work with Mitsubishi, Turboden, and we just finance their equipment, that would take a lot of the fears that Steven had immediately away because there's the company you can have recourse against. If there's turbine doesn't work, you say, here, Mitsubishi, here you go. And that takes the big fear away. You have taken your biggest selling card off the table in minute number one.
And what you make yourself, which is very much needed, is a project finance company. Right?
Yeah.
And you need someone to pull all this together. They don't want to spend CapEx dollars on doing this. You have the financing sources. You put this project together. You have the engineers to say, here's this really, well accepted technology. Could be Mitsubishi here, or whatever it might be. We can take that. We're agnostic. That's the right one for this situation. All we're doing is putting this project together, financing it for you, and allowing you, whoever is running this facility, to collect revenue from the offsets and to reduce your energy costs.
Totally different story.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess I didn't go through the background here. So my background is in project finance. I was an early employee at Generate Capital. Spent the last 4.5 years at Generate Capital.
Right.
And so when I was there, I built the largest portfolio of anaerobic digesters in North America. So it's about a $250 million portfolio. And when I started in that industry, it was very nascent. There wasn't very much investor interest. They had a lot of starts and stops, but not a lot of traction. So my job at Generate Capital was to make it an institutionalized and investable sector, and that's what we did. So
starting off that way instead of the problem. And so you very quickly say, look, the problem is waste heat. We have a project finance solution to that. Let me tell you a little bit about our platform. We're technology agnostic, but what we're really hoping to do there is to be the leading project developer to capture waste heat from heavy industrial sources. That's good. Then now, now I'm interested. Now 500,000 seed investment still seems light, but I want to know about it. And I want to know in particular for a lot of your investors, who's providing the capital for these projects and what do those returns look like? Because I may be interested in giving you a little bit of seed, but what I really want to get my hands on is the opportunity to finance those projects with these excellent counterparties on the other side.
Yep. Okay. That's fair. Yeah, we can go through. I mean, yeah, it's a balance, right? Like what
I know there's a lot to cover in 3 to 5 minutes, right?
When the person on the other side probably doesn't even know what project finance is.
Right. So, well, and you got to filter your investors. If the person on the other side doesn't know what project finance is, they're probably not the right investor for you.
I totally agree there with Steven. But it's going to be rough for you at the beginning. As you said, you're probably looking, and that didn't become clear out of the story, you're probably looking to raise some equity right now in order to get the company going and actually get it through the planning process. And then you're probably going to finance your project with, some kind of, maybe a little bit of equity and mainly a lot of senior debt, which is going to be a lot of cheaper because you have a working system. All of this kind of doesn't come out. So it is going to be difficult for you to raise those first 500,000 because you might be talking to people that literally don't know what project finance is. I'm totally with you on that. But if you can take Steven's advice and talk to people that are going to come on board right now to give you the seed investment, to get you the point on execute on that $1 billion pipeline, because they want to be the people that are doing the project finance later, like maybe Macquarie Capital, or any of this kind of funds out there that mainly invest into assets. This might be the great partner to kind of get you guys off the ground and just prepay you with some kind of fees, because that's what they're really interested in.
Yep, that makes sense.
And I mean, just for me, when you now repeated the story, you have everything in there to get started. You have a background in project finance. You know how to make things bankable. You have a major partner on your side, and you're looking at a major, I would think, one of the most underrated industry opportunities in clean energy out there, because the heat is already there. Nobody is doing it, and the technology is ready, and the market is ready. But the big companies, the industrial companies, are a little bit hesitant of making the investment, or at least they're very, very slow. And this is why companies like Macquarie Capital, they all come in and finance their solar assets, and you're doing the same for the waste heat. It's a very simple business proposition. If I had the money, I would invest in that to me immediately.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thank you. I wasn't quite sure what the setup was. So this wasn't a pitch, this was just pitch prep? Or?
We call this pitch prep, yes. We just like to give some feedback because otherwise, especially during Zoom times, there's something we have seen the last few weeks. It's a lot easier to get the appointment. It's easier to get in the door, but it's also a lot easier to zoom out for the person on the other side and just say thank you. But there's just not enough feedback out there. And that's why I love working with Steven on this, is because he has heard thousands of pitches over the years. So first of all, he has an amazing network himself. And second of all, I mean, I think we can, it's a very safe environment to make your pitch very precise as possible. But you have everything in that story, I think, that investors are looking for. But the first 500,000, if you don't find the right partner, might be the toughest money to raise. It's like the first 500,000 of an investment fund, right? After that, it gets easier. But that little money to get started, which sounds out of proportion to the challenges you're facing, always a little bit tough. Steven, how do you feel about it? Where would you go to raise that money?
Well, look, I would talk to some of the people who are interested in the project finance. The seed you're looking for is not a lot, and I think a lot of them would be willing to invest to get that first look or right of first refusal, whatever you structure, to do that project finance. I think that's the best place to start on this. But ultimately, look, we didn't have much chance to go into how big this can be and what kind of equity value you can create in the platform. There will be other sort of early stage angel seed investors who have some experience with renewable energy, are looking for ways to generate, businesses that can generate better returns than where solar and wind have matured to. And I think that the ones who have had that experience would be interested in supporting the seed. We didn't really have a chance here, Janice, to go into the detail of your vision for the company and where it grows to, and what does the 500,000 seed lead to next, and what do you think is the the revenue you can generate from the platform and the value. But I think there'll be some who have had that experience, you know, the type of people who were early financiers of Generate, have seen that model work and know that there's a real shortage of people out there who can develop and finance projects, right? Assets, and help all of the things we needed to do around the climate crisis and decarbonization and energy efficiency get done. So, you know, I would kind of scrub through and say who's financed some of those other platforms in the past, and they'd be good to look at this one too.
Are there any like investors that you have in mind on the project finance side? Maybe.
Yeah, I do. We can definitely touch base offline and talk about that. I have a few that I think would be really interested in seeing this, and again would want to tie it all in together.
We have a few of them as well, Janice.
Or whatever, and then we'll follow up.
Yeah.
Sure,
Let's circle back tomorrow.
So
Janice, we have a nice list of people that exactly doing this kind of project finance. And as you will find out, once you kind of start flying, because the margins are so low on solar projects now, and there's so much capital that has been distributed in those kind of impact funds for solar, everything else, there is a lot of capital in that field right now. So more than happy, circle back tomorrow. Let's talk. Steven's also great at getting back, and let's find a solution. Just one question. I'm just guessing your background is Asian somewhere? Any Asia plans yet?
Yeah, I am born and raised in Canada, but my background is Vietnamese.
Okay, so I mean, also, I don't know, what's your take on Asian markets right now? Totally undeveloped in waste heat?
Yeah, I mean, China is developed. Most of their cement plants have a law that all cement plants must have waste heat recovery. So they're definitely experienced in waste heat recovery, but there's still a lot of opportunities there just because of the sheer amount of manufacturing in Asia is larger.
Exactly, because I mean we're based in Indonesia, right? We're based in Indonesia. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but for us it's late. So we work a lot in the Philippines and Indonesia, Singapore, Taiwan. So this is our backyard, right? Thank you, Janice, for taking the time. We're moving on. We circle back tomorrow. Thank you so much. Really, it's a great story.
Talk to you later.
Thank you, Janice. As we're moving on from, let me just gather my thought here for 1 second. From organic Rankine cycles, we're going to carbon negative data storage. Okay, and we have Niall Davidson with us, and obviously data centers have become one of the major energy demands in the world, and is growing every single day. And thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very good, thank you. And yourself?
Fantastic. And Neil, where are you based?
Montreal, Canada.
Fantastic.
Funnily enough, you just typed Janice on, and Janice and I are both in Canada's Clean Tech Accelerator at the moment with the Canadian Trade Commission in the United States.
Yes, that's actually one of the new cooperations we're doing is with your accelerator. We had a Greentown Labs last week, and it's great to have you guys on board. Quick introduction, Steven, 41 years in New York. Tell us quickly something about yourself for the few people who don't know you.
I am, God, that's a hell of a question. Thanks for that. I'm just a guy, computer geek, basically.
You're not from Montreal originally.
I am not from Montreal.
I've not heard that accent in Montreal.
Well, you used to hear this accent a lot in Montreal. No, I'm from Scotland. So I came from Scotland to Montreal about 6 years ago. So I'm quite mobile, but yeah. I love it here. It's a fantastic place. Only thing is the weather. I would change that. If they could get rid of the weather, I'd be so happy here.
Right. Well, it wasn't great where you came from either.
No, but it never got quite as cold.
It's worse than Scotland? It's hard to imagine. I mean, that's tough. Neil, give us a brief introduction. What does your company do, and why should we care?
Okay, tell you what. 3-minute pitch. Would you like me to give you a 3-minute pitch? Can
Absolutely.
I share my screen? Does that make sense for you folks?
Sure, if you'd like to. Go ahead.
Okay. Host will need to enable me. Okay, so I can't share my screen at the moment. So, okay, never mind. I'll just kind of...
Hold on 1 second. Where's Oliver?
Certainly.
Our tech man just went to the bathroom. So give us a 30-second introduction yourself without this. We like to do the introduction without the slides anyway, because now that we're all on Zoom, we kind of have to choose if we look at you or the slides, right? So we want to get to know you.
True enough. Okay, so I've been building computer cooling systems for 20 years and computer systems for 30 years. And we've developed a technology that for the data center allows us to cool data centers better, but more importantly, it will also make data centers carbon negative. So that would be the case that we're on Zoom and people are watching on YouTube. Well, when we are successful, there will be a data center somewhere in the world removing carbon dioxide when we are watching. So it's a very useful kind of technology, we believe, and it's something that incredibly is profitable. So.
All right, we're ready for your slides right now. I'm going to get you started.
Yes, you've piqued my interest, so I'm saying, okay, how do you do this?
That's a good thing. Okay.
Because I mean, carbon negative, that would be huge. I'm really looking forward to that solution.
Okay, so my name is Niall Davidson, and I'm the founder and CEO of ADC Technologies. We are based in Montreal, Canada. I've been building computer systems for 30 years, liquid cooling systems since the late 90s. And we've developed a data center cooling solution that will make data centers carbon negative. Imagine then if the billions of people who are online each and every day were each contributing to the solution to climate change. Well, that's what our technology will do. Remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere whenever anybody does anything online. And we're projecting the removal of nearly 5% of the CO2 that the world emits annually today, every year by 2050. And the way we do this is by first changing how data centers are cooled. Cutting an average data center's total cost of ownership by about 20% and their energy use by as much as 30%. But more importantly, using their waste heat as the input energy for direct air capture plant to profitably remove CO2 from the atmosphere. Now, everyone wants to reduce their costs, and data centers are no different. But a data center going down can be a career-ending event. And this has kept data centers using inefficient cooling for decades. But we also looked at ways to create value from the captured waste heat. And that's when we stumbled upon the killer app that is carbon capture, capable of generating 10 times more value than efficiency savings alone, but also capable of driving adoption of both our cooling technology and carbon capture. Our proof of concept has proven our key technology works, and our approach has been validated by Natural Resources Canada for a collaboration between the Canadian federal government and Bill Gates' Breakthrough Energy Ventures. We've also been granted a Solar Impulse Efficient Solution label, and our host partner, Hypertech, who are one of the largest server manufacturers in Canada, have not only agreed to host the pilot of our technology, but have also determined that it makes sense to deploy it in Quebec, which, because of that lovely cold weather, is already one of the cheapest locations in the world to operate a data center. Initially, we'll sell hardware to cool existing off-the-shelf server hardware, but our long-term goal is to license our technology and transition towards hardware as a service, supporting the capture and sequestration of carbon dioxide at scale. We have patent grants in Singapore, Japan, Europe, and Israel, pending in the United States and Canada. And we're presently raising just over $1 million to build the first full-scale installation of our solution. As we close that round, we're also offering a convertible note now for between $50,000 and $100,000 so that we can maintain our IP, specifically in Singapore, where we have 2 patent grants, and our technology would be massively helpful. Thank you very much. So there we go.
Now, could you go through again with me how this becomes carbon negative?
Okay, so we're going to go a little bit further on. So with the data center, you have a massive amount of waste heat. If you look at Amazon's AWS service, it builds data center pods that are 80 megawatt of critical capacity each. So you now have basically, basic thermodynamics, you now have almost 80 megawatts of heat, which you have to do something with. Either you can throw it away, which unfortunately most people do. You can maybe use it to heat a building, but there's not a lot of buildings that require, next to a data center, 80 megawatts worth of heat. In our case, what we discovered is that when you take that waste heat and it comes out of the data center at about 40 degrees, it comes out of our cooling technology at about 40 degrees, you push it up in temperature via heat pump. So you input some energy. At that point, you now have 100 degrees centigrade waste heat. You can use that for direct air capture. So plant from companies such as Climeworks and Global Thermostat and a variety of others, they need this massive amount of input energy to actually remove the CO2. And the problem they have today is it is not cost effective to do it. There's no real way to monetize that CO2, and generating the necessary input energy is itself basically consumes the entire cost. So they end up having no capability to make profit. And it is a real kind of problem, to the point where we need carbon tax credits to make that work. With the data center and the business model we've outlined, where, for example, you could pay a little bit extra on your Netflix subscription, that all of a sudden it creates a lot more than tax credit can generate, and it creates a lot more than efficiency savings alone. So it becomes profitable. So
yeah, see, now this is interesting, and it's also very complicated. I know a lot about direct air capture, but I'm one of the few in your audience that would, right? And I've seen
Absolutely.
This Climeworks facility outside of Zurich.
Lucky you.
And so, I think there's sort of two parts to your story. And it may not necessarily be in your interests to make them so interconnected. As I hear your story, if there's a more efficient way to run a data center, right, that in and of itself is of great value. But there's a lot of challenges that go with that in terms of how to get a data center to implement your structure, your design, your architecture, as opposed to the way they've been doing it all these years, even though that's much less efficient than it needs to be. So the part one is, okay, I've got technology to make data centers cooling more efficient. That in and of itself is a valuable economic proposition. I need to have a plan around that, a go to market, how to get data centers to adopt it, right?
Yes.
By the way, part two, completely independent, is there's waste heat that comes out of this, right? There's waste heat that comes out of everything. Any of that waste heat, the meeting we just had, the session we just had, they could use their waste heat instead of using it to create electricity. They could use that waste heat for direct air capture too.
Yes.
And so I would kind of put that and say your vision is to team up. But why is your waste heat better for that than anybody else's?
So the key here is that carbon capture is the killer app. So getting people to change how they're cooling their data center, they need an incentive. And, like anything, it needs to be financial. It has to come down to dollars. Everything does. Carbon capture, enabling that, you not only have a pressure from consumers at the moment, companies like Amazon, Microsoft, all announcing, hey, we're going to be carbon negative. You not only have these companies having this pressure, but a financial incentive to change is also something required. So we have the go-to-market for the thermal rail component, the cooling part. But the value add is the carbon capture part and the value that can be generated from the waste heat. And at the moment, no one else is going to be able to do that. We're patent pending on doing that. So you can either come to us or you can't do it. So from our perspective, carbon capture is the second part. It comes later down the road. But right now, it's changing the cooling with the goal of getting the waste heat into the form that can then be used for carbon capture.
So then to link that together makes a lot of sense. But then the story I'd want to hear, again, I may be a little bit too informed on this stuff, is I'm very much aware of the commitments that Amazon and Microsoft have made to go to net zero, right? To go to carbon negative, right? And they are two of the biggest owners and operators of data centers in the world, right? So you have a very interested, right, market, customer base to go to. And to say to them, you could run your data centers, not just to be less carbon emitting, but to run a data center to be carbon negative, that's of interest, not necessarily to me while I'm doing screen time and saying I can be carbon negative on my screen watching a video instead of planting a tree outside. It's of interest to these large companies, right? Microsoft and Amazon and Google and others who are leaders in their decarbonization pledges. So the question I then have for you as an investor is, I get it. I can see how Amazon and Microsoft would be interested in this. This solves many of their problems. They use less energy and they are removing it at the same time, and they're going to need offsets to hit carbon negative. How are you going to get to those companies?
So we actually have already had conversations with both Microsoft and Amazon. I'm regularly in touch with the guy in charge of Amazon's data centers, a guy called James Hamilton. And Microsoft, we have contacts. And basically our entire business model is developed because of customer discovery with companies such as Microsoft and Amazon, as well as Google, who was one of the first companies we reached out to. So we are basically trying to hit their marks, if you will, to see, hey, does this work? Because, you know, the simple truth is we are saying something, hey, this is big. And they're saying, okay, prove it. And one of their big proof points is prove that this can be done cost effectively, the cooling part. Never mind the secondary part. So the cooling part first. And that's why we're working on it. It's basically to hit the mark.
So I think what you've just laid out there is a better way to present this, which is, okay, data centers are a problem. And by the way, the people who are running those data centers are the ones who have made the most aggressive pledges about becoming carbon negative, right? So how are you going to take these two things and connect them together? How are you going to get the Amazon, Microsoft, Googles of the world who have real definitive goals within short time frames, and yet they're running a very energy intensive and inefficient facility? How are you going to pull those together? ADC has the solution, right? Interesting, because I know data centers are a problem, and I know waste heat is got to have better uses for it. And I know Amazon and Microsoft and Google are the leaders in this. Absolutely. What you're doing is pulling all of this together. And now I'm really interested as an investor. This is like a win-win-win solution. And then my questions as I go deeper will be, do I think you're the one who can be successful at this? And then you'll convince me that. But you've got me on the hook because you're solving a big problem with a very willing market, a very willing customer, very interested customer. Julien, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We actually have IP that basically covers quite a lot. We have 7 patent families. We cover the basic concept for the cooling technology, the thermal rail, which was our initial kind of the technology that we developed. So we cover the thermal rail concept. We cover lower cost servers designed specifically for thermal rail, and various claims that cover things that would make it very difficult to replicate without having without being able to actually use that IP. But we also now have IP relating to using a data center's waste heat for carbon capture in the way that I outlined and that I'm talking about here. But that specifically targets a cloud operator such as an Amazon. It's not only the technology, how to do it from the heat pumps and the waste heat and all the rest of it, it's also how they would offer that to their customers to make it difficult for them to work around as well. So we have a variety, a kind of large, broad kind of our IP portfolio. Our initial target market is to adapt existing servers to our cooling technology. That would allow also carbon capture for existing data centers with a little bit of work. But the primary goal is to get to the point where the industry shifts onto our technology or a technology putting out the waste heat like that so that we can do the carbon capture. And we've developed our business model with that in mind. We've also developed our business model very much with how the actual IT market works. And it's very specific in various ways. So we can't, for instance, produce a proprietary cooling technology and have people jump on it. They just won't, they'll ignore it. The industry's proven that time and time again. They have, however, proven how you produce a proprietary or own technology and then let make money from it through things like the Wi-Fi Alliance, which is why we all have Wi-Fi on our phones, and people who invented it make money. So, yep. Yes. We were finally selected as finalists for Breakthrough Energy Solutions Canada, which was the Canadian federal government in collaboration with Breakthrough Energy Ventures. The folks we talked to at Breakthrough Energy Ventures basically told us, we decided years ago that we're not looking at data centers, and if you want us to, you're going to have to convince us. So we're at that point of having to convince them, which.
I would otherwise say, obviously we're looking for investment dollars. All of the companies that you're targeting have also investment arms. So we're a natural fit.
Yeah. We're trying to connect right now. Yeah.
Right. And to the extent that they're interested in it, I think other investors will follow suit. But, it is a little challenging because there are a lot of skeptics around direct air capture. There's a lot of people who don't even want to go into that space. They'd rather have natural solutions and just reduce our energy. So you've got to find someone who's willing to accept direct air capture as part of the solution. And, then you have the front end data center. So, look, it's hardware. It's a unique solution, but it's much needed. And as I said, you have a receptive customer audience. So if you can pull it all together, you have a terrific opportunity on your hands.
Thank you very much. We do believe so. So thank you.
Yeah, look, I think it helps to drop names. I think it helps to mention, Microsoft, Amazon, Google's right off. That always piques people's interest. They know they're leaders in this, and they know they're innovative and willing to try new solutions. I think you've got to really use that. Ultimately, you're going to have to prove it. You're going to have to say you're getting real traction with them. But to get an investor interested, I think that'll go a long way. Talking about this conceptually, thrown in direct air capture and the names like that won't grab people's attention as much as these companies have a problem. We can solve it.
Sure. Okay. It's great advice. Thank you. No, we do it wherever. We're not bothered about that. Where it's. Mm-hmm. That would be incredibly useful. Sounds great. I will definitely do that. Thank you very much.
Again, I think what we've proven today is that every story is different. It needs to be told differently. You have to be aware of who your audience is. You need to curate who your potential investors are too. It's not everything will fit what investors are looking for. I think all of that needs to come into your thinking about how you, in a relatively short time frame, 3 minutes is kind of arbitrary, but quickly get people interested, right? The right people interested in your story. It takes some feedback. It takes some practice. It takes some insight to say, yeah, this is the right chord for me to play. And knowing that you got to be able to change that around a little bit depending on who you're speaking to. So in terms of a presentation, again, art, not a science, Julien. It just takes that feedback and that practice and trying to find those hooks that'll get people interested right away, get excited right away, and want to go deeper.
Definitely. Yeah, as soon as possible. Basically, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. I think it's necessary. I think absolutely none of the forecasts, the solutions can work without carbon capture. Now, carbon capture is in my mind, 3 different components to it. There's a lot of opportunity with natural carbon solutions. And in natural carbon solutions, I include agriculture, but there's a lot of carbon that could go into the soil, in grasslands, forestry, mangroves, and as I mentioned, agriculture. So natural carbon solutions needs a lot of innovation, a lot of attention, a lot of capital. We got to get going on that as soon as we can. Second, there's carbon capture at the point of admission. And we need to be doing that. There are some things, as we've seen today, like steel mills and cement mills that need a lot of heat. They can't just use solar and wind. It's not going to work that way. They are going to be, for a while, emitting carbon. And we got to keep that carbon from going into the atmosphere. So there's carbon capture at that point of admission, which we got to continue to get the price down and then find markets for that carbon. And those markets are developing. And then the third piece of it is direct air capture, again, through technology, assuming that there'll always be competition on land use, that you could do sustainable agriculture for a while, but as soon as you till that land, you're releasing all that carbon again. So it doesn't necessarily have the permanence that you're looking for. And to be able to capture some of that carbon from the atmosphere and store it geologically in places where you can capture the carbon everywhere. It's the same amount of carbon no matter where you are on the planet. Find places where you can store it long term and put it in it. We need to do that too. And we need to continue to do the research and development to make that technology as economical as possible. But there isn't an opportunity to solve our problems with just reduced emissions, with just mitigation. I hate to go on too long on this, Julien, but the analogy I always use for everyone is like a bathtub that's already overflowing, right? You don't just try to turn the faucet off a little bit. And by the way, there's lots of different faucets, right? There's US and Europe and China and India. There's the electric grid. There's food and agriculture. There's transportation. There's industrial. All of these have to be shut off altogether. How are we going to do that? And you don't otherwise just go get a mop and clean up the mess. What you do is you open the drain as wide as possible. The problem is that the whole system, the equilibrium, is out of balance. So yes, we should put a much less carbon into the atmosphere and the oceans, but yes, we need to figure out ways to take a lot more out, right? And so carbon capture, carbon removal, and either using it or storing it is the only way that we're going to get our overall carbon equation in balance, the way, as a planet, we've all committed to. I think, like many of these other things, it's all of the above. There doesn't need to be one winner, right? It's same on the other side of it, renewable energy. You know, we had our kite company. It doesn't have to take the place of solar and wind turbine. What we need to take the place of is fossil fuels. And the same thing with carbon capture. I wouldn't say that there will be a winner or needs to be a winner. I think that if it's a worthwhile marketplace, there should be lots of successful companies, right? There doesn't need to be one manufacturer of electric vehicles. We're seeing that now. There can be many of them that are successful because, yes, there's some competition with each other, but they're really competing with the internal combustion engine and gasoline. So I think we take the same approach. All of these solutions can work, should work. They just may have different applications. Right. Thank you, Julien.